The recent deployment of Russia's S-400 missile defense system in Venezuela represents far more than a routine military transfer. It is a geopolitical earthquake whose tremors are fundamentally reshaping the international order. This single act, placing one of the world's most sophisticated anti-air systems just a few hundred miles from the United States coastline, shatters a core tenet of American foreign policy that has stood for over 2 centuries, the Monroe Doctrine. For generations, the United States has treated Latin America as its exclusive sphere of influence, a strategic backyard where its will was ultimate law. The arrival of the S-400, capable of creating a 400-kilometer no-fly zone that threatens U.S. air and naval approaches, signals the violent end of that unchallenged hegemony. This is not a simple provocation, but a calculated declaration of a new, multipolar reality, where American power must contend with other nations playing by its own rules of power projection. The initial shockwave that rolled through Washington, a potent mixture of disbelief, outrage, and profound strategic anxiety, was not merely about the missiles themselves, but about the potent symbol they represent, the end of American exceptionalism in its own hemisphere, and the dawn of an era of contested dominance. To understand why Russia made this audacious move, we must look beyond the immediate headlines and into a complex web of geopolitical strategy, economic interest, and ideological warfare. For Vladimir Putin, Venezuela is the perfect chessboard for a low-cost, high-impact gambit designed to checkmate the United States on multiple fronts. Geopolitically, it creates a strategic diversion, forcing a U.S. military already stretched thin by commitments in Ukraine and the Indo-Pacific to open a worrying second front in its own backyard. This is a masterclass in strategic reciprocity, a mirror held up to Washington. For every U.S. missile defense system deployed in Poland or Romania on Russia's borders, there will now be an equivalent Russian system stationed within striking distance of American shores. It is a brutal assertion of strategic equality. Economically, the move secures Russia's massive investments in Venezuela's vast oil reserves, acting as a security guarantee for its energy giant Rosneft and ensuring that the deeply indebted Caracas regime remains tethered to Moscow. Furthermore, this alliance, forged in the fires of mutual U.S. sanctions, serves as a live-fire laboratory for developing sanctions-busting techniques, from trading in local currencies to exploring digital assets, directly challenging the weaponized U.S. dollar. Ideologically, Putin positions Russia as the vanguard of the multipolar world, the champion of national sovereignty standing against American unilateralism. By defending Venezuela, he burnishes his credentials as an anti-hegemon, a message that resonates powerfully across the global South, weary of Western coercion and double standards. The instrument of this strategy, the S-400 Triumph, is a masterpiece of modern military engineering that transforms the strategic landscape through its sheer capability. This is not merely a defensive weapon, but an integrated ecosystem of death for anything that flies. Its suite of powerful radars, including the formidable gravestone and tombstone systems, can detect, track, and classify hundreds of targets simultaneously, from stealth aircraft and strategic bombers to swarms of drones and even hypersonic missiles. The system's true genius lies in its mixed arsenal of missiles, each designed for a specific purpose. The long-range 40N6 can eliminate high-value support aircraft like AWACS and tankers from 400 kilometers away, blinding the enemy before the battle even begins. The 48N6 serves as the workhorse against fighters and cruise missiles, and the highly agile 9M96 provides point defense. The presence of the S-400 creates a formidable anti-access area denial A2AD bubble over a vast swath of the Caribbean, fundamentally altering the military calculus for the Pentagon. It raises the cost of any potential intervention to a prohibitive level, granting a weaker power like Venezuela a powerful deterrent against the world's foremost military. The message encoded in its radar waves is unmistakable. It is a shield for sovereignty, a declaration that the era of consequence-free coercion is over, and a symbol that the tools to resist American hegemony are now operational in the Western Hemisphere. The response from Washington to this challenge has been a revealing display of strategic confusion and the limitations of a superpower trapped by its own outdated playbook. The official reaction, a cycle of strong condemnations, hollow threats that all options are on the table, and a failed diplomatic offensive to rally a divided organization of American states, exposed a profound lack of viable countermeasures. The immediate reflex to impose yet more sanctions only highlighted the boomerang effect of this overused tool. Rather than isolating Venezuela, years of economic warfare had pushed it into the arms of Moscow, and doubling down merely cemented that alliance. The military options were equally bleak. A direct strike risked a catastrophic escalation with Russia. A naval blockade was an act of war, and a heightened regional presence was provocative but ineffective against the deployed S-400s. This paralysis stems from a deeper failure of imagination in Washington, a toxic combination of arrogance, complacency, and the neglect of Latin America as a strategic priority. The United States, accustomed to dictating terms, found itself without a playbook for a scenario where its own tactics were being used against it with brutal efficiency, revealing an empire struggling to adapt to a world it no longer commands. This military standoff, however, is merely the sharp end of a much deeper and more significant struggle, the economic roots of this new great game. The deployment of the S-400 is a direct consequence of the United States' weaponization of its financial power. For decades, the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency and control over the SWIFT payment network have been the bedrock of American coercion, allowing it to sanction nations into submission. However, this strategy has now reached its limits, triggering a frantic and determined great uncoupling from the U.S.-led financial system. Nations targeted by sanctions, along with those wary of American caprice, are actively building a parallel financial architecture. China is promoting its cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, as an alternative to SWIFT. Bilateral currency swaps are bypassing the dollar for trade between Russia, China, and India, and the BRICS Plus alliance is expanding, creating its own new development bank and contingent reserve arrangement to challenge the IMF and World Bank. Venezuela itself became a laboratory for this, experimenting with petro-cryptocurrencies and bartering its gold and oil for food and medicine. In this context, the S-400 batteries are more than just missiles. They are a formidable shield protecting this nascent economic rebellion. They provide the security for nations to engage in dollar-free trade without fear of U.S. military retaliation, making the S-400 a powerful symbol not just of military deterrence, but of economic emancipation from the empire's financial stranglehold. The global reaction to this crisis has been a cacophony of competing interests, revealing the fractured state of the post-American world. Beijing watches with calculated silence, publicly supporting the principle of multipolarity while carefully avoiding direct confrontation, all the while taking notes for its own long-term strategy regarding Taiwan and expanding its Silk Road influence deep into Latin America. In Europe, NATO displays deep divisions, with hawkish Eastern European members like Poland sounding the alarm, while wary Western powers like France and Germany fear being dragged into a US-Russia conflict not of their own making. The alliance, built on a clear Cold War premise, now struggles with the burden-sharing debate and a lack of consensus on how to respond to a challenge in America's backyard. Across Latin America, there is a sense of anti-American schadenfreude in longtime adversaries like Cuba and Nicaragua, while major powers like Brazil and Argentina view the situation with pragmatic realignment, seeing an opportunity to diversify their partnerships and assert greater independence. Pro-US allies like Colombia watch with alarm, feeling newly vulnerable. The silent majority of nations simply observe, understanding that this moment marks a significant shift in the global balance of power, where the periphery is no longer bowing to the core, but actively participating in reshaping it. The silent, formidable presence